Yom Rishon, today's Sunday, Hey, Thomas, the 25th day of the month of Thomas. And we're learning Tanya. And we're going to relearn what we learned last Sunday. Last Sunday we started Perek Dalet. This Sunday we're going to start Perek Dalet again. It's not like I intend on repeating what I said last Sunday. I don't want to do that. I'm starting from the beginning because I want to teach it not differently, but additionally. Okay? The discussion of Perek Dalet is about what's called Levushe HaNefesh. The Neshama has an inside, its connection to the Eibishter. It has a middle, it has a center, which is its form, its definition. And it has its outside, the relationship to the environment around itself. So Perek Bey spoke about the inside, Perek Gimel spoke about the middle, and the beginning of Perek Dalet talks about the outside, the relationship with the Neshama and the world around itself. In as much as the Neshama relates to the world around itself, there's three levels. Communication with self is called thought. Communication with others like us is called speech. And communication with others that are not like us, that means animals, plants, and minerals, is called action. Machshava, dibur, ma'aseh. Now we know, and this is going to be developed in Mitzvah Hashem later as well, that there's two neshamas. There's the nefesh elokis and the nefesh habahamis, two nefashis. The nefesh elokis and nefesh habahamis. And each one of these nefashis is complete. Complete means it's not only different because they have a different source, or a different core, or a different essence. They have a separate set of tools, a separate set of koiches, two sets of seichel and midas. Seichel and midas of the nefesh elokis and seichel and midas of the nefesh habahamis. And they even have a separate set of levushim. That when you think divrei Torah, you're using one machshava. When you're thinking other things, you're using literally a different levush machshava. And the same is true in speech, and the same is true in action. It's completely separated. So you have thought of nefesh elokis is Yiddishkeit. Speech of the nefesh elokis is Yiddishkeit. Action of nefesh elokis is also Yiddishkeit. Okay? So let's begin to read the Perek again, Perek Dalet. Ve'ed, in addition to the deepest part of the neshama, and the middle part of the neshama, yesh l'chol nefesh elokis shleish levushim. Every neshama has three garments, and this is the outermost part of the neshama. Shehem, which are machshava, thought, and like I said, it just means when a person communicates with himself. Dibur, speech, when one communicates with those like himself, mean other human beings. U'maaseh, and action, which one communicates with things less than himself. And of course, the Rebbe says right away, Shel Taryag Mitzvah Torah. When you're talking about thought, speech, and deed of the Nefesh Elokis, it's exclusively, it's entirely Machshava Dibur U'maaseh of Taryag Mitzvah Torah. Okay, that's it. Nothing outside of Taryag Mitzvah Torah has to do with the Levushim Machshava Dibur U'maaseh of the Nefesh Elokis. And he explains, Shekesha Ha'adam Mekayim B'maaseh. When a person does behaviorally, called mitzvahs maisius, all mitzvahs that are behavioral, ubadibur, and through speech, who oisik, he engages in a preoccupied way, bepirush, in interpreting, kol tayag mitzvahs, v'lchisein, in interpreting and explaining the 630 mitzvahs and the laws associated with them, ubamachshava, and in thought, who masig, he reaches an intellectual understanding of kol ma she'efshar lahasig, whatever he is able to intellectually reach, bepardes haTorah, in all four levels of pshat, remez, drushim, seid, and Torah. So you have three garments that are all involved in Torah and mitzvahs. Thought is involved in learning Torah, speech is involved in speaking Torah, and action is involved in doing mitzvahs. So, to be very specific about it, very precise and very specific about it, we have 613 limbs and nerves, gidim, in our group, in our body. And we have 613 mitzvahs. Each one corresponds to another one. So theoretically, even though I only have three garments, machshava, dibur, u'maaseh, when I'm using thought to do a mitzvah, which is one of the ramach eivrim, so I'm using the levush ha-machshava, and it's connected to that part of my body, which is connected to that mitzvah. When I'm doing a mitzvah with speech, so when I'm speaking mitzvahs, when I'm doing mitzvahs with dibur, there's a variety of different mitzvahs that I can do. So the levush ha-dibur is only one. The garment of speech is only one. But whenever I'm doing a mitzvah with Lavush Hadibar, I'm connected to that particular limb which is connected to that particular mitzvah. And the same is true when I do a mitzvah b'mais. But the Alter Rebbe divides it into two. Listen carefully. Harei, number one. Klolus taryag evarei nafshei. All 613 organs and limbs of the person, milubashim, are become garments for b'tayag mitzvah satera, the 613 mitzvahs. In other words, there's 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. There's all different parts of a person. When a person learns Torah and does mitzvahs, all of the person is a garment for all of the mitzvahs. That's how you touch this line. Harei klolus taryag eivei nafshei. The total of your 613 evarim are a lavush for the 613 mitzvahs. So first the Alter Rebbe generalizes that when a yid is involved in Yiddishkeit, all of the Jew becomes a garment for all of the mitzvahs. Now, how that works, and why that works, of course, the simple answer is we don't know. The more complex answer is because in Kedusha there's no separations. One of the differences between Kedusha and Klippa is that in Kedusha there's no separations, and in Klippa there's separations in everything. Why? Because in Klippa, the center of Klippa is self, is Gaiva. So just like in people, Klippa in people separates one person from another. The same is true in Avedis, for example. Avedis compete. They don't have a connection with each other. In Kedusha, where there's a base of Bittul, so there are no separations. So when a Yid is doing one mitzvah, that mitzvah is part of Tayag mitzvahs. So even though he right now is doing one particular mitzvah, he's connected to all of the mitzvahs. When a Yid is doing a second mitzvah, since mitzvahs are connected to Kedusha, so although right now he's doing only one mitzvah, he's connected to all of the mitzvahs. Or to say it differently, not everybody could do every mitzvah. Not everybody can do every mitzvah. So we do mitzvahs for each other. The mitzvahs that I cannot do, you do for me. The mitzvahs that you cannot do, I do for you. And so on and so forth. And even in a broader sense, there are mitzvahs which Bachlav can't do nowadays. Right? We don't have that many mitzvahs asay. More than 2/3, or around 2/3 of the mitzvahs asay we don't have in Zman HaGolus and Chutzlaretz. But when we do the mitzvahs, we're able to do because we're talking about Kedusha, we're connected to all of the mitzvahs. That's how you translate this one line. Let's read it again. Hare klolus taryag eivei nafshei. All 613 limbs of your body, milubashim, become garments for betaryag mitzvah satero. All 630 mitzvahs. You're doing one mitzvah. You're doing two mitzvahs. You're doing a mitzvah b'machshava, you're doing a mitzvah b'dibur, you're doing a mitzvah b'maisa. You're doing whatever mitzvah you're able to do. And you're using the levushim of machshava, dibur, b'maisa. So you're wearing the garments of thought of mitzvahs, you're wearing the garment of speech of mitzvahs, you're wearing the garment of action of mitzvahs in certain mitzvahs. But because you're dealing with Kedusha, because of the certain mitzvahs that you're doing, all of you is connected to all of the mitzvahs. That's the taich of this line. If somebody has a different taich of this line, you're welcome to share it, but that's the simple taich. Klolus, taryag evrei nafshei, melubashim betayag mitzatei. And then the Rebbe says uba pratius, but more specifically, and more specifically means, even though anytime any yid does any mitzvah, b'machshava or b'dibur or b'maisa, with either thought or speech or action, klolus evrei nafshei, his whole body is connected to all of the mitzvahs. Because, like I said, like I'm explaining, in Kedusha, everything is interconnected, but there's also a practice, there's a specific. Now, what's the specific? And here I'm going to put words into the Tanya that are not written here. And these words are written in this footnote from the Rebbe on my margin, which is from the Shemis. Okay? What does the Rebbe say? That when the Alter Rebbe breaks up the relationship between a Yid and Yiddishkeit into what's called Klalus Upratus. Klalus means that when I do any part of Yiddishkeit, all of me is connected to all of Yiddishkeit. And Bepratius means that when I'm doing a specific aspect of Yiddishkeit, there is a particular relationship between a piece of me and a piece of Yiddishkeit. So the Rebbe says, and I'm saying it almost exactly as the Rebbe says it. The Rebbe says that the Alter Rebbe doesn't state the obvious. He only states the unobvious. Okay, so I am going to be repetitive. I'm going to repeat myself because I want you to understand clearly what I'm trying to explain and what I'm adding to the Tanya that's not written in the Tanya. Okay, we'll start from the beginning again. Two things that you see, two words that you can't deny, is the word klolos and the word pratus. They're one line apart. Yeah. If you're looking at the beginning of Perek Dalet, 6 lines, then you have the word klolos, and 7 lines you have the word pratus. So there's 2 concepts here. The first concept is called klolos. Klolos means any yid involved, any yid of Yiddishkeit. All of that yid is garmented by all of Yiddishkeit. All of Yiddishkeit. There's tayag mitzvahs, and there's a yid has tayag evenim, has many parts. I'm doing only one mitzvah, either b'maisa or b'dibur or b'machshava, or I'm doing one mitzvah on all 3 levels, machshava, dibur, or maisa. One of the ideas that I didn't get to last week, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get to it, but it's mentioned in Tanya later, and you get a Sakedish, Simon Chavtes, I believe, that every single mitzvah, all tayag mitzvahs, have all 3 levels of machshava, dibur, and maisa. In other words, even though some mitzvahs are called mitzvahs in machshava, some mitzvahs are called mitzvahs in dibur, some mitzvahs are called mitzvahs in maisa, in every mitzvah you really have all 3 levels of machshava, dibur, or maisa. And the most complete way to do mitzvahs is to do all tayag mitzvahs on all 3 levels of machshava, dibur, or maisa. But you're doing one mitzvah, and you're doing it by maisa, or by dibur, or by machshava, or perhaps you're doing it with all 3, you're having a good kavanah, and you're making a bracha, and you're doing a mitzvah, whatever the machshava, dibur, or maisa of a particular mitzvah would be. So you're doing only one mitzvah with certain parts of your guf, not even with your entire guf. So the Alter Rebbe says, klalus, you should know, all of the yid is connected to all of mitzvahs. Why? So again, the answer that I think is correct is because in Kedusha there's no separations. You have a similar idea by Torah, we'll get to it later, that when you're learning one part of Torah, you're connected to all of Torah. Similarly, when you're doing one part of mitzvahs, you're connected to all of mitzvahs. And not only is one piece of you connected to the mitzvah, all of you is connected to the mitzvah. This is called klolos. Klolos. Der ganze Mensch ist verbunden mit ganz Yiddishkeit. All of the Jew is connected with all of Judaism, and if you wanted to add a 3rd dimension to this, the whole Jew is connected with all of Judaism and with all other Jews. It's also a part of this, because we do mitzvahs for each other. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bazeh. That's what klolos. And then there's the pratus. When I'm doing a mitzvah, there's a specific relationship. So the Rebbe writes in this footnote, he asks questions. And the Rebbe writes in this footnote that the way to explain the Tanya is that the Alter Rebbe does not state the obvious. He only states the unobvious. So the obvious we're going to state. What is the obvious? The obvious can be said in 2 different ways. Number 1, I said this before, I'm repeating myself now, okay? There are 613 mitzvahs and there's 613 parts of human being. There's Ramach Eiverim and Shesag Gidim. I don't know how you figure the Shesag Gidim, but there's Ramach Eiverim and the Shesag Gidim. And there's Ramach Mitzvahs Aseh and the Shesag Mitzvahs Leisas. Now let me add something which is very important to me. I like to repeat this. You must bear in mind that when you say that there's Ramach Eiverim, you're not including all the important parts of the person. Included in the Ramach Eiverim is not the brain, is not the eyes, is not the ears. I'm not even sure if it includes the nose. It certainly does not include the lips and the tongue. It doesn't include the heart. It doesn't include the lungs. It doesn't include the kidneys. It doesn't include the spleen. It doesn't include the intestines. It doesn't include all the plumbing in the person. Why? Why? Because a eiver means a bangel, a bone. The Mishnah lists 248 eivarim, and eiver means bones. Basa, gida, vatzavis. All the eivarim pnimim, what you call in English organs, as opposed to limbs, are not in the cheshbon of Ramach Eiverim. So when you say that there's 613 mitzvahs, you must understand that there's 613 mitzvahs that are called specific mitzvahs. A mitzvah connected to one part of the body. But there are also mitzvahs for every one of these organs. There's a mitzvah for the right side of the brain, and for the left side of the brain, and for the center, the back of the brain. There's a mitzvah for the right side of the heart, and for the left side of the heart. And the Sefer Yetzirah lists, the Sefer Yetzirah goes through all these eivarim pnimiyim, and explains, at least to some extent, what they are and what they mean. How the Sefer Yetzirah goes on the Oisius of Aleph Beis. And he explains the pnimius. But the point is, there are many things that people don't appreciate that are called mitzvahs kloliyos. Mitzvahs that are not in the number 613. But they're not in the number 613 because they don't matter. They're not in number 613 because they matter too much. Right? We know this from the Kutatei Pashas Bolok. Kutatei Pashas Bolok, the Alter Rebbe brings that when you count the Ramach Evidim, you don't count the spinal cord. The Chut HaSheder is not counted. And the Alter Rebbe says, how could you not count the spinal cord? God forbid, the spinal cord is severed, the person is a paraplegic, the person is a cripple is paralyzed. So the Alter Rebbe explains, because the spinal cord is not a limb, it's the whole person. And when you count Ramach Evidim, you're counting individual parts of the person, not whole and total, whole parts of the person. So when you make a cheshbon of mitzvahs, there's a cheshbon of mitzvahs. We know what they are. You're looking at Rambam, you count 630 mitzvahs, and of course you know Emunah is not one of them. Simcha is not one of them. Higher madregas of tefillah are not one of them. Higher madregas of tshuva are not one of them. A lot of pnimiistic things are not included in the cheshbon of the Ramach mitzvahs, because the Ramach mitzvahs are measured by ritual, by a behavior, by a ma'aseh b'peil, by a doable thing, by a measurable thing. Yiddishkeit has a pnimius. The pnimius of Yiddishkeit is higher and deeper and more important than the Ramach. The Rebbe has in Tanya, in Kunter Sachren, near the end, the second to the last shtickle in Tanya. There's another letter also when he gets in Igros Kedesh of the Alter Rebbe, which I heard the tape once. The Rebbe spoke by Chabrena, where he says, if somebody says that davening is only midrabanan, leiro me'eres miyamav. Lina, I will let you ask your question. The Alter Rebbe writes in again. It's not in Tanya, but it's printed in the Igros. If somebody says that davening is not menatei, he never saw me'eres, luminaries, a source of light in his life. So the Rebbe analyzes by Chabrena. I heard it in a tape. I didn't read it in a sikha. So when you hear a tape, the mile is that it's so levadik. The chassaron is that you don't pay. You're not sure if you heard it correctly. What the teichen of the sikha was that when you say davening is not a mitzvah, it's like saying that the mitzvahs are mechanical acts. Understand that all these mechanical acts have a neshama, and the neshama of these mechanical acts are the credibility and the vibrancy. So technically, what's tefillah? To ask Hashem for your needs. Spiritually, what's tefillah? To have a relationship with Neibishter. So you're going to start arguing whether asking Hashem for your needs is a deraisa derabbanan, forgetting that the pnimius of tefillah, having a relationship with Eibishter, having a relationship with Eibishter is not a deraisa. So the answer to that question, if you're a mathematician, if you're a techno-Jew, it's not. But if you're a Jew with any seichel, or with any sensitivity, of course it's, what's Yiddishkeit without the Eibishter? No, it's not in the math. It's not one of the 613. It's not one of the 248. So Alter Rebbe says, okay, so you're seeing a lot of ideas, you're seeing a lot of light, you never saw the source. You have no connection to the essence of what Yiddishkeit is. And I don't know exactly, I don't know at all, but there's a mathematics, there's a cheshbon for all the Avodim Pnimi, with which there are many, right? Beginning with the brain, and the eyes, and the ears, and the mouth, and the heart, and the lungs, and so on and so forth. Every one of these Avodim is not in the cheshbon of the Ramach Evidim, it's not part of the 248 positive mitzvahs, because it's not a prat, it's a klal. So what the Alter Rebbe says here, that when a Yid is Mekayim the Tayag mitzvahs, any one of the Tayag mitzvahs, any one of the 613 mitzvahs. So Beklalos in general, whatever mitzvah you do, all of you is connected to all of the mitzvahs. And Bepratius, whichever mitzvah you do, gives you a specific connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what I'm adding is, so first of all, I want to explain where I'm going with this. Every part of your body is connected to one mitzvah. That's the cheshbon. There's a Ramach mitzvahs are saying, and there's a Ramach Evidim. And every mitzvah is connected to one organ, to one piece of the goof. And there's a sefer which is called Sefer Charedim. I own it, but that's where it ends. The Sefer Charedim has hundreds of mitzvahs. He was after the Arizal. And he correlates the mitzvahs to body parts. He doesn't do all 613, but he does several hundred mitzvahs, and he shows you which mitzvah is connected to which Eivim. So when you're doing any mitzvah, so even though Beklalos, all of you is connected to all of mitzvahs, and like I'm saying, if you want to make it even bigger, all of you is into all of mitzvahs, and all of you is into all of the other Jewish people. Because Kol Yisrael Reivim Zeh B'Zeh, when you're doing one single mitzvah, then there's a Bepratius. Bepratius means I'm doing one mitzvah. This mitzvah is connected to one part of me. B'Meileh, whatever mitzvah I'm doing, that part of my guf is wearing that lavush. You see, machshav is a garment, speech is a garment, action is a garment. On which part of me is that lebeged being worn? So in general, that garment is surrounding all of me, and specific, that garment is surrounding that part of me, which is connected specifically to that mitzvah. I mean, again, I want to add, this doesn't only mean the technical mitzvahs, the tayag mitzvahs, the ramach mitzvahs say, and the shasam mitzvahs like say. It means b'mekol shekain, the mitzvahs that are more pneumistic. They don't count. They're not in the number. 248 mitzvahs I say, but not because they're less important, because they're all important. They're the essence of Yiddishkeit, like Amunah, like Simcha, like the higher madregis of Tshuva, the higher madregis of Tefillah, higher madregis of Avos Yisrael. There's aspects in Yiddishkeit that are not aspects. They're the whole thing. The aspects are mitzvahs. The whole thing is I call them super mitzvahs. That's the expression that I use when I teach my students this sugya. But this is also a part of it. So bepratius, there's a piece of you connected to this particular mitzvah. And because there's a piece of you that's connected to this particular mitzvah, when you do the mitzvah, that part of you is wearing the shirt, either of Bachshava or Dibur or Meiser, all three, associated with that mitzvah. And I just want to say a story, which I've told recently, and then I'll let you ask me a question. I just absolutely love this story. I think it's such a meidendik amais. And the nicest part of the story is the fact that someone came to ask this question. And I've told it to you many times. It's a maise. It's a maise. It's a story about a Jew. Rabbi Glukowski from Yisrael, from Rechovis, once spoke here in 77, and he told a story. That when he was a bach in yeshiva, a young man came in. I don't know if he was a bach man, but he was not a chassid. From what I understood, he was more yeshivish. He didn't specify what kind of person he was, but he was not a chassid. He was certainly not a Lubavitcher. And he rolled into 770. So of course, this was the times of Yechidus. So someone came to 770, so before the person walked into the Rebbe, they asked him, what you're going to talk about? And after he came out of the Rebbe, they asked him, so what happened? And most people were not interested in sharing either, but you had to get through I don't know what the word is, the vultures, the bachim would sit around and wait for a shtickle word. I just read last night that the Shazar visited the Rebbe, President Shazar. And Shazar says to the Rebbe, I'm going to walk out of here, the bachim are going to surround me, they're going to want to know what you told me. But I'm not allowed to say a word, it's all top secrets. What should I do? So I'll tell you something that you could repeat to them. And the Rebbe told them something to repeat. Zera sharf word. I forgot the word, but it was very sharp. Anyway, so this guy comes to 770, so the bachim surround him. Why are you here? So he tells them a very sensitive thing. He says that he's ill. There's an illness in his brain. Whether he told him what was the nature of the illness in his brain, I don't know. And it doesn't really important. But he said like this, he's not coming to the Rebbe as a Rebbe. He's not even coming to the Rebbe for a bracha or for a meifus. He's pashit coming to the Rebbe as a chochem, as a lamb. The Rebbe knows a lot of Torah, and he knows Kabbalah. So B'meila, the Rebbe knows in Yonim and Torah that he in his circle cannot know, and he pashit needs information. So he's coming to the Rebbe for information. What is the information that he needs? He says he knows. Listen to the sensitivity. He knows that every part of the body is connected to a particular mitzvah. So he wants to strengthen that mitzvah to cure his physical illness. Now I think this is the story. How sensitive a person you have to be seriously ill, and to think, okay, what mitzvah is going to cure me? It's a chush. It's a very chassidish chush. Maybe he would recall today on Misnagid, but the story is the fact that it came to ask. It's such a sensitive story.
That safer and find it. Could a person look in that safer?
Sefer Charedim often, yeah.
Yeah, and you could find it.
Yeah, but in this case, no. He came to the Rebbe, so he comes to the Rebbe for this eitzah. So first of all, the idea that this person came to ask this question is very profound. We know what the Gemara says about Torah. Chosh bereisha yasek b'Torah, chosh b'zreya yasek b'Torah. If you learn Torah, it heals you. So the Welt the Kasha, the Rebbe said this Kasha. I learned Torah, my headache didn't go away. I learned Torah, my hand didn't stop hurting. So the answer is you have to know which part of Torah is connected to which mitzvah. But if you'll think about what we're learning here, you'll understand something. That this will depend on the eichus of your learning. if you're learning Teda on a more lower level, then you have to have the right piece of Teda that's corresponding to that Eivet to have a cure. But if you're learning Teda on a level, which here the Alter Rebbe calls Beklolos, in other words, on a deeper level, on a higher level, then it really doesn't matter. So in other words, it's not only you have to know which piece of Teda, which works for which Eivet, it's the nature of the quality of the limud. If the limud is on a lower madrega, then it has to be more specialized. If the limud is on a much higher madrega, then it can be more general, because on the higher levels, the Teda is more one, philosophically. But here you have a situation with mitzvahs, which each mitzvah is into one limb. And I'm going to say again, and now I'm really speaking off the cuff, without a thigh, without a source, that the mitzvah, same thing. If you do mitzvahs on the highest madregas, so you don't lose, it doesn't matter what mitzvah you're doing, because all the mitzvahs are connected, then it's healing. But if you're doing mitzvah on the lower madrega, you have to know which mitzvah is connected to what limb. Anyway, he goes into the Rebbe and he comes out of the Rebbe. So the Baruch surrounded him again. And they said to him, "Nu, ma diber haRebbe," right? Like you have in the Pashas Bolak, "Ma diber Hashem." Ma, what's the Rebbe get for it? So the Rebbe told him something Kvaldik. And I think that what the Rebbe told him is connected to the Hakdama that I gave you earlier. The Rebbe told him as follows. He says, the brain is an Eiver Kloli. It's a general organ. Now, I'm going to now put in Pirush Rashi. Okay, my name is not Shleimi Yitzchaki, but you understand what I'm saying. I'm giving you my interpretation. An Eiver Kloli means it's not one of the Ramach Eividim. The brain is not one of the Ramach Eividim. It's not true. The brain case, the skull, is amongst the Ramach Eividim, but the brain itself doesn't count Ramach Eividim. Why? It doesn't matter. But because it's klal, the whole person is the brain. The whole person is called Ivarim Shanishama Tluya Behem. There's a halachas in all kinds of cases where one part of the body is considered the whole person if a person can't live without piece of the body. All day, you can't live without a heart, you can't live without a brain, you can't live without kidneys, you can't live without a lung, and so on. Lungs. So it says, you have a problem in the Eiver Kloli. So you can't correct a mitzvah, because the mitzvahs deal with Evarim Pratim. You have an illness in an Eiver Kloli, so you need a tikkun in an Eiver Kloli. So the Rebbe told him that he should work on the mitzvah of Hashkocha Pratis. This was what the Rebbe told him. I discussed this in the last 2 months. We had this conversation before, here in Tanya class. The Koch and the mitzvah of Hashkocha Pratis. I never knew mitzvah Hashkocha Pratis was a mitzvah. So now you learned several things new. That there's a mitzvah called Hashkocha Pratis, and there's such a thing called being more mahada than a mitzvah. And basically it means we have a moon in the Meibishten, and apparently a moon in the Meibishten has aspects. One of the aspects of a moon in the Meibishten is to believe that everything that happens to the person, the Paltiel is Medeshem, Mitzadei Gevek, and the Meibishten is leading us on a journey. And the mitzvah of Hashkocha Pratis, or the enhancement of the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Hashkocha Pratis, is to train yourself to value whatever happens in your life as coming to you from the Meibishten. That's one way of looking at it. Yeah, and it's also to see more and more the Hashgacha of the Meibishten in your life. I'm sorry. To see more. So here you have a Moedin Dekamaisa, which reveals, the way I learned this story, a new dimension. You have to understand mitzvahs. People have a simplistic concept of mitzvahs because they think there's 248 limbs. The 248 limbs are pieces. And there's 248 mitzvahs that are pieces that correspond to them. There's something deeper. There's the Eividim Kloliyim and there's the mitzvahs Kloliyim. And in each case, there is what the Alter Rebbe is calling Beklolos of Pratis. Beklolos means whatever inyan Yiddishkeit I'm doing, all of me is surrounded by all of Yiddishkeit. And Bepratis, whatever part of me is connected to that particular mitzvah, is wearing the lavush, either of Machshava or Dibur or Meiser or all three. Machshava, Dibur, or Meiser, as I am fulfilling that particular mitzvah. Okay? But just like it's true in Yonim Klolim, it's true in Yonim Pratim. The fact is, we have 248 mitzvahs, and they correspond to each one of the 248 limbs. In other words, not everything that we do is cosmic. Not everything that we do is the whole world. Some of the things we do are simple acts. A person puts a penny in a pushka. Maybe tzedakah counts also according to the Yerushalmi as a mitzvah close. There's many mitzvahs that we do that are specific aspects. So, beklolos, you would say that any mitzvah I'm doing means that all of me is wearing all of the garments of Tayag Mitzvah Satera. And specifically that part of me, that eva, that limb, that finger, that hand, that foot, that toe, that leg, that is involved in, or that rib that is involved in that, or that vertebrae, that bone in the back of the neck. The spine is made up of many, many vertebrae. Each one a separate eva. Yeah, that is connected, that particular mitzvah is garmented by the mitzvah that I am doing. Okay, so this is called beklolus or bepratus. But you must understand that bepratus, well, everything I just told you doesn't say in the Tanya. The beklolus does say in the Tanya. But the pratus, the Rebbe says that the Alter Rebbe doesn't tell you the obvious. He doesn't tell you the obvious. He just tells you the chiddush. So the obvious is what I just told you, but that's only the first derech. There's another way of explaining it. I'm going to let you speak first, and then I'm going to continue.
I just have a question. A varum that's always commonly transferred as limbs, not bones. Like a leg has many bones, but it's one leg. So I'm confused.
A varum is translated as limbs. And then limb is called in Torah, basar, gidim, v'atzamis. A limb is made up of three parts. A bone, flesh, and strings. No, every bone is a bosom derevet. And they count them as separate evarim. You can take, check out the Mishnah is ohel, it's not hard to read. He counts the Ramach Evim, you can count them yourself.
Otherwise, how would you get?
He counts in every hand, 30 evarim. In the hand, till the wrist. Yes, 30 evarim. No, 30 evarim. In the hand, this is 30 evarim, this is the shoyzech. So every leg has many bones. Every bone is a separate evad. That's the cheshbon. Now, I'm not sure that what Mishnah says and what anatomy says is going to be exact, but it's quite close. It's a difference of a few dozen maximum, how they count limbs, bones, and we count bones. It's not such a big discrepancy. It's not like Taylor says 248 and they've got 1,012. I once researched this. It's a long time ago, and I wasn't paying that much attention. I thought they were close. Okay, Meshach make it sefrit. But you don't count the foot as one bone. There's as many evadim as there are individual bones in the leg, and in the foot, and in the thigh, and so on. So each bone, which has basar, gidim, v'atzamis, all three things. A bone, which is the inside, the etzem. The basar, the flesh, which is the outside. And the gidim are explained as they connect the bone to the meat. That's how it's explained in Likutei Torah. That makes an aver. And every mitzvah is connected to each one of the Ramach mitzvah is connected to one of the Ramach aver. That's correct. Now, I'm going to continue now, yeah? So for those who walked in late and if you're coming on time, I'm going to repeat myself, no chamo, okay? We started Peirik Dalet from the beginning again. We learned it last week. Mamish last week, not 2 weeks ago, last week, even though it was a tanis. I think we learned it last week. No, but I think we learned Tanya. And I'm reading it again with you. So we started to read the Peirik, and we stopped by the two words, the klolos or bepratis. That when you're doing a mitzvah, you have to do a mitzvah using a shirt. You can't do the mitzvah without a shirt. Your neshama, even your guf, can't do the mitzvah without something called a lavush. What are the lavushim? Thought is a shirt. Speech is a shirt. An action is a shirt. It's a beged. It's a garment. You're a person, and when you do something, the action you're doing is in addition to you. You're a person, and when you say something, the speech that you're uttering is separate from you. It's outside of you. Even thought, you're a person, and when you think something, especially when Chassidus defines what thoughts means, I don't have time to be maidech in this right now, so there's something in addition to you. That addition is called a garment. It's a beged. It's on top of you. There's so many mitzvahs. So the first Alter Rebbe says the clothes. You should know, anytime any Jew does any mitzvah, all of him is garmented by all of Yiddishkeit. By all the mitzvahs. You're doing one mitzvah. With one part of your goof, with one lavush, machshava or dibur or maaseh. So the whole person, beklavos, all of you is garmented by all of the mitzvahs. This is the first one. Then comes the bepratius, in specific. And when you get to the word of specific, the Rebbe writes in the note that the Alter Rebbe doesn't state the obvious, he only states the unobvious. So I'm putting in the obvious, I'm adding it. Now do I know if I'm right? Of course, you people know that if I say something intelligent, Mistama, I didn't make it up. If I say something that sounds good, Mishtama status is for them. Why? Because I'm not such a smart guy. So I don't make things up. I may misinterpret, I may miscorrelate, but I don't make things. I hope not, at least. Yeah, so I explained to you what this means, bepratius. So the first form that I gave you for bepratius is that every part of the body is connected to a particular mitzvah. And mitzvahs go into two categories. mitzvahs pratias, individual mitzvahs, which are connected to the fingers and the toes and the arms and the legs and so on. And mitzvahs klolias, general mitzvahs, which are connected to the organs as opposed to the limbs. The brain and the eyes and the ears and the lips and the tongue and the heart and the lungs and the kidneys and the spleen and the liver and the intestines and so on and so forth. There's a whole cheshbon how many there are. A whole cheshbon how many there are. I think it's ultimately Chov Beis. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. There's Chov Beis, Devarim, Kloliyim. They're also connected to mitzvahs. And when a person does a particular mitzvah, whether it's a mitzvah pratis or it's a mitzvah klolis, he is wearing that shirt, the lavush of machshava dibur u'maisa, that's performing this mitzvah on that part of his body which is connected to that mitzvah. So in general, the whole person is connected to all of the mitzvahs, and in particular, every part of the person is connected to particular mitzvahs, and when you do those mitzvahs, so you're not just doing the mitzvah, you're doing the mitzvah with the lavush, other machshava, other dibur, other maisa, you're doing the mitzvah. So you need the garment, either thought, speech, or deed. So the garment with which you're performing the mitzvah wraps that part of the body which is associated with that mitzvah. This is version A. This is the first way of understanding it. And the second way of understanding it is a little bit different. It's not very different, a little bit different. And that is, you don't necessarily use your whole goof when you do every mitzvah. Unless you do mitzvahs, like a lulav shaking in the wind. I was once in a shul, and I saw a yid daven. The man was shaking so furiously. I Pasha didn't know he doesn't pass out. And you chuckled. He was dominant. But he was shaking so fast, with so much energy, I couldn't understand I can't remember how much blood was running into his brain. When I was younger, I chuckled more. I got older, I chuckled less. You know why? Because I pushed less koyach. Even chuckling takes koyach. Okay, maybe I'm getting a little smarter and a little more eingestellt, but it's mostly the first. Mostly. Yeah, but you don't, most of the time, you don't do a mitzvah with your whole goof. Sukkah you do with your whole goof, yeah? Mikvah you do with your whole goof, but that's it. Most mitzvahs are performed with a part of you. Your arm, your leg, your mouth. So this is the second version, that the piece of you that is behaviorally performing the mitzvah is garmented by the levush of machshava, dibur u'maisa that is doing it. In other words, not always is the part of you that's doing the mitzvah the same as the avit which is connected to that mitzvah. Right? It's the mitzvah connected to the ribs. Yeah. So how do you do a mitzvah with your ribs? Yeah. How do you make your rib go in? Make your ribs? They don't move. They're not supposed to move. They move with toignish. Yeah. So there's mitzvahs connected to the tzlois, to the ribs. So you're doing a mitzvah with whatever part of your body. So in one level, so since the rib is connected to that mitzvah, that levush, that garment is garmenting your rib. And in a different way, and they're not contradictory, there's two different ideas. The physical part of you that's ritually performing, that's physically doing that mitzvah, is melubash, is garmented by the mitzvah that you're performing. Okay? So we did two things so far today. We did beklalos, and we did bepratus. Okay? Beklalos means that it doesn't matter what mitzvah you're doing, all of you is connected to all of the mitzvahs when you're performing any of the mitzvahs, because everything is connected in Kiddush. Bepratiyas, one part of you is connected to each individual mitzvah that you perform, because mitzvahs are connected to evarim, pratiyim or evarim, kloliyim, whatever the case may be. And when you do the mitzvah, you create a lavush, thought, speech, or deed, or all three, which is a garment for that evarim prat. Now the first part says in Tanya. The second part doesn't say in Tanya, so it doesn't say in Tanya. Why am I saying it? Because the Rebbe writes, Loi nokat ha'inyin ha'ikri shemislapshet ven. I'm reading you the Rebbe's words, word for word. The Alter Rebbe does not explain the obvious, the ikir idea of the relationship between parts of the body and mitzvahs. Elo ha'inyin sheyesh bei chidush. The Alter Rebbe doesn't state the obvious. I guess that means he expects us to figure it out on our own. He explains only the Dovish Yesh Bechiddush. So I told you what I think the obvious means. And now we move on to what is the Chiddush. So we're going to read inside. And I'm going to tell you now, we're probably going to have to do this next week. Okay, in other words, it's a little involved. We covered a lot today, I think. I hope what I taught you was clear. We're going to read it and probably come back to it next week. Ube pratius, and in specific. Which means that if you have a Tanya, we're on page Ches Amud Aleph, which would be 15, okay? And we're holding 7 lines from the top of the page. Ube pratus, and in specific. And again, as the Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe is not stating the obvious about the Ube pratus. He's stating only the Chiddush about the pratus. Bechinas Chabad shebenafshe, the aspects of your neshama, which are connected to Chabad, which are also connected to the brain. Milubashes are revealed b'hasogas haTeira, in understanding the Teira, shehu masig bepardes, that one reaches and understands in each of the 4 levels, or whatever of the 4 levels. Pshat Remes Drushin say, Kifi yechelas asagose, according to the possibility of your intellectual understanding, v'sheiresh nafshei l'mayla, the source of your neshama on high. So what's the Rebbe saying now? The Rebbe is saying now that there's another thing. Besides for the fact that there are mitzvahs and there are body parts, and there's a parallel between mitzvahs and body parts, there's another thing. There's a parallel between the koiches and the mitzvahs. Koiches means your intelligence. Your arm is an aver, yeah? Your brain is an aver, as the Rebbe puts it, which is connected to mitzvahs of seichel. Now we're not talking about mitzvahs of seichel, we're talking about Torah. There's a connection between your intelligence and mitzvahs, and that's a chiddush. And he continues, and next week I'll go over this again, and I'll explain it. V'hamides, and the emotional attributes of a person. And again, he's not talking about the limbs of the person, the physical parts of the body, but the koiches hanefesh, shein yira v'anfein, yira v'ahava, v'anfein v'tolisei, which is fear and love, and all the tributaries, all of the branches that come from the 2 primary emotions, which is fear and love. Milubashes also are garmented, b'kiyum ha-mitzvahs b'maiso b'dibah. When I do a mitzvah behaviorally, or I do a mitzvah with words, so not only is the mitzvah garmenting the part of me that parallels the mitzvah is garmenting the emotion that's associated with that mitzvah. Okay? Ha'ahava, because love is sheirish kol ramach mitzvah say, is the root of all the 248 positive commandments. Umimeno hey nimshachet, and all the 248 positive commandments come from ahava, and I want you to know that the Rebbe loves to point out, yeah? There's 248 positive mitzvahs. One of those positive mitzvahs is Avas Hashem, is loving the Eibishter. Here the Alter Rebbe suggests that in addition to Avas Hashem being one of the 248 mitzvahs, it's the source for the 248 mitzvahs. I mean, this you probably don't remember, but I do remember. Tafshin Nun Beis, the Rebbe spoke. That what is the word neir? Neir. Nun Reish is 250. What's 250? The 248 mitzvahs plus Ava v'Yireh. Problem is, Ava v'Yireh are in the cheshbon of 248. So there's 2 in Yonim and Ava v'Yireh. There's Ava v'Yireh as individual mitzvahs, and Ava v'Yireh, which is the source of all the mitzvahs. But there's another chiddush, yeah? Ava, the source of all 248 positive mitzvahs. What is one of the 248 positive mitzvahs? Take a wild guess. Yirah. Fear is a mitzvah say, Esa Shama Lekachatira. So love is the source of 248 mitzvahs, which means it's the source of fear, which means that it's the source of all the 365 negative mitzvahs, which are sourced in Yiras Hashem. So Av is the beginning of all Yiddishkeit. Like it does in the Zayah, Leif Pulchana, Kepulchan, the Dechimusa. There's no avoida like the avoid of Ahava. So let's read. All the 248 mitzvahs come from love, from the emotion of love. Ubiladah. And if a person does mitzvahs and he's missing the emotions, ahava, love, ein lem kiyum amiti. The mitzvahs do not have a kiyum, persevering, a lasting that is true. Ki amakayman be'emes, to do the mitanemes, who oyev v'shem avayah, is only if you love Hashem, v'chafetz ledofka be'emes, and you desire to become attached to Hashem mitanemes, v'i efsher, it's impossible L'dafka by the MS to attach yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitanemes ki'im, unless you have b'kiyum ramach pikud in the 248 mitzvahs, that these 248 mitzvahs are expressions of love. So the proof that you love the Eibishter, because you do what he says, but the integrity of doing what he says is that you love him. You can go through your life and do all of the mitzvahs. If you don't have in your heart any feelings for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no emes. On the other hand, you could love the Eibishter and not do any mitzvahs. No? If you love the Eibishter and you don't do what he says, you don't really love him. Because if you love somebody, you do what they want. So it's the combination of Avas Hashem, and that the expression of the Avas Hashem is in the kiyum of each and every of the Ramach mitzvahs sasei. Vayachol k'meshikos of Nokamach as it's kiyum b'kiyum Ramach pikudim by doing the 248 positive mitzvahs. Shein Ramach even in the Malka. These are 248 limbs, so to speak, Vayachol organs of the Eibush. K'meshikos of Nokamach as explained someplace else. And the Rebbe is mitzayin to Perichov Gimel, Perichov Hey. V'hayira, and fear, he shadish l'shasal leitas, is the root of the 365 negative commandments. Ki yarei limrei, you're afraid to rebel. The Melech Macham HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter, who's the King of kings, of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. Or alternatively, yira pnimius midu, a deeper fear than the former. Shem is beishish, one's ashamed, not afraid of the Eibishter, but you're embarrassed. Migdulase, from the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, limreis einei kavegit, to rebel against his glorious eyes, his eyes of glory. V'lasei sarabe einov, and do what is evil in his eyes, which includes kol te'avas Hashem, anything which is to the Eibishter an abomination. Asher sani, which he hates. Hey, and what is this? Ha-klipes v'sitra achara, which is klipa and sitra achara. Asher yinikasa meha'ada matachta, that klipa and sitra achara nourishes from the mistakes we make. And the hold it has on the person and how it nourishes from the person is b'shasam mitzvahs leisa, because our failures in doing the 365 negative commandments. So this is the second aspect of beprotius. You have a klolos and you have beprotius. The first aspect of beprotius is that there's a part of you that's connected to each mitzvah. What's the second part of beprotius? You have a mind and a heart. You have intelligence and emotion. Intelligence is not a limb, it's not an organ, it's an neshama, koyach. Emotion is not a limb and an organ, it's an neshama, koyach. And beprotius, different of your faculties, your seichel and your midas, are garmented through different mitzvahs that I do. And we'll continue this in Mitzvah Hashem next Sunday.
So is this called the Nefesh HaSichlis?
No, just Nefesh HaLikis. The Nefesh HaSichlis. Okay, we'll take a break and then we're going to do a Maimer. We're going to continue from Friday in Mitzvah.